Ever felt like the louder someone talks, the less power they have? Imagine the quietest person in the room, the one who says little but moves with precision. How often do they end up in control? There's something deeply powerful about stillness, especially in a world that's always shouting for attention. What if I told you that the most effective leader isn't the one who speaks the most, but the one who speaks the least? It's the person who stays calm, focused, and knows exactly when to act. In today's noisy world, that type of composure is not just rare, it's revolutionary. In a society where talking over others has become the norm, the ability to hold your words, stay composed, and act with intention is a game changer. It's not weakness, it's true strength, and it's a power most people overlook. Let's talk about why silence can be your greatest weapon. Main content: the loudest voice in the room doesn't always lead. Often it's the calm, focused presence, the one who says little but moves with clear intent, that ends up in control. In a world that never stops talking, there's an incredible power in the person who knows when to remain silent. This isn't about avoiding the spotlight. It's about sharpening your edge, being strategic, and waiting until it's time to strike. They're not avoiding attention, they're building their strength. They're watching, calculating, holding their fire until it truly counts. And here's the thing, that's not weakness. That's real strength. In a world that constantly pressures us to speak up, prove ourselves, and show everything we're working on, it's easy to forget the power of silence. The more you explain, the more you risk losing your edge. The more noise you make, the easier it becomes to miss the bigger picture. Silence is a tool of strength, not avoidance. And there's a reason why the Stoics were masters at maintaining composure, holding their thoughts, and acting only when the moment was right. They didn't just want to be wise, they wanted to win. While others were unraveling in chaos, the Stoics remained steady, using silence to sharpen their focus and gain control. Today we're diving deep into this concept, the strategy of silence. But let's be clear, this isn't about avoiding conflict or staying out of the conversation. It's about using silence to enhance your presence, sharpen your mind, and master yourself in a world obsessed with noise. If that sounds like something you need, stick around. This isn't just motivation. It's a new way of showing up in the world. And if you're someone who appreciates content that cuts through the fluff and actually helps you build real inner strength, do me a simple favor. Tap that subscribe button. Let me know this message is reaching the people who truly need it. Have you noticed that the strongest presence in a room is rarely the loudest voice? It's the person who listens carefully, weighs their words, and only speaks when it's absolutely necessary. When they do speak, everyone listens. It's not magic, it's mastery. Mastery of emotion, mastery of impulse, mastery of energy. In a time when so many are desperate to be heard, the person who chooses silence becomes magnetic. They draw attention not by reaching for it, but by deserving it. Silence signals control, not just over the room, but over the self. And that kind of control is rare. It says to others, this person doesn't need to dominate the space because they've already mastered themselves. Socrates once said, "The beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms." But how can you define anything clearly, especially yourself, if your thoughts are constantly spilling out before they're fully formed? The person who holds back their words isn't hiding, they're thinking, sharpening, and preparing for the right moment. Most people confuse noise for value. They believe that if they talk more, they'll be seen as smarter, stronger, or more important. But the truth is, noise rarely builds anything meaningful. It's the quiet ones, the ones who master their impulses and speak when they're ready, who end up controlling the conversation and winning in the end. Continuing from the previous section, where we explored the power of silence and self-control, now let's delve deeper into the powerful effects silence can have on your mind and actions. Silence is not just the absence of words. It is the space where intention could have lived. True power doesn't come from how much you say. It comes from the strength of what you choose not to say. When you stop reacting out of ego, stop explaining out of fear, and stop justifying just to be accepted, you stop bleeding your energy. And what happens in that silence? You create space, not just around you, but within you. And that space becomes a forge, where your thoughts are refined, your presence grows sharper, and your movements carry more weight. Carl Jung said it simply: your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. Silence is the door to that awakening. It is where you begin separating your true self from the performative version always trying to be liked, noticed, or validated. We leak so much of our strength through unnecessary speech. Every time you speak just to fill silence, just to be included, or just to feel important, you are spending energy that could have been invested in action. Worse, sometimes you give away your plans before they've taken shape. You inflate them with attention before they have even had time to breathe. And then when it's time to act, the motivation is already gone. Plato said, "Wise men speak because they have something to say. Fools because they have to say something." It's a sharp line, but there's truth in it. When you operate from a place of internal security, you don't feel the need to explain every move or narrate every goal. You let your results do the talking. You let your progress, slow, focused, and undeniable, build the story for you. There's something deeply empowering about moving in silence. You stop chasing applause and start chasing depth. You learn to sit with your ideas before turning them into announcements. You wait for your instincts to confirm what your ego might have already tried to declare. And when you finally act, it's not about proving anything. It's just who you are now. No fanfare, no big speech, just action. Clean, strong, deliberate. And here's what's beautiful. When people finally notice, you don't need to say, "I told you so." You don't even need to look back. You've already moved on to the next thing. That's how powerful silence becomes when you master it. It gives you momentum that isn't dependent on anyone's reaction. Aristotle once said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." But that kind of knowing doesn't happen in noise. It happens in stillness, in reflection, in moments where you don't feel the need to defend or declare anything. Because when you're not busy performing, you start listening. And when you start listening, you start learning about others, about your environment, and most importantly, about yourself. That's when you stop being reactive. You become strategic. You stop saying, "Here's what I'm going to do," and start asking, "What actually needs to be done?" And you do it quietly, fully, without wasting words. When you talk about a goal, your brain gives you a hit of satisfaction, as if you've already done the thing. The applause comes early, the reward feels real, and because you've already tasted the praise, the hunger to actually follow through starts to fade. That fire, that edge, it dims, not because you can't do it, but because you've already been satiated a little. That's the power of silence and self-mastery. When you stop to listen and reflect, you begin to understand the world around you and yourself. Silence is not just a strategy, it is the path to lasting success. As we dive deeper into the power of silence, remember, it's not just about staying quiet. It's about channeling your energy and focus into action. But here's the thing. You might feel like you've already done the work, and that's where the trap lies. It's easy to fall into the illusion of accomplishment, good intentions, loud announcements, but with very little to show for it later. More people are caught in this trap than they realize. So instead of announcing your next move, build it in silence. Let your efforts speak before your voice ever does. When you do speak, make it count. Speak only when it adds something real, something strong, something necessary. Otherwise, keep your focus locked in and your mouth closed. Silence is not weakness. It's your strategy, it's your advantage. Think about a master chess player. They don't rush, they don't get emotional, and they certainly don't try to show off. They study the board, read the room, calculate the patterns. They wait, and then with one quiet, precise move, they flip the game. Not because they moved first, but because they moved right. That's what silence gives you. Space to think clearly, space to move wisely. This kind of discipline isn't passive. It's actually one of the most active mindsets you can carry. It takes strength to hold your ideas close, to work without clapping for yourself, to build quietly while the world watches someone else. Silence isn't about sitting back. It's about being deeply involved, but with a kind of energy that doesn't leak. It's like aiming before firing instead of shooting wildly and hoping something lands. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." You can't build anything meaningful if your energy is always pointed outward, toward other people's opinions, toward empty praise, toward the need to be seen. Silence is the turn inward. It's where you stop reacting and start creating. It's where you stop proving and start building. When you don't feel the need to broadcast every thought or declare every intention, you take back control. Your focus becomes sharper, your decisions more intentional. You move with purpose instead of impulse. And when the results finally arrive, they're undeniable. Because they weren't just talked about, they were earned. Plato believed that the measure of a man is what he does with power. And true power begins with self-control. Not just over what you do, but over what you say, over what you reveal. Over how much of yourself you give away before the work is done. Every time you speak, you give people a piece of your inner world. So why not wait until it's something worth handing over? This isn't about secrecy or paranoia. It's about energy, focus, direction. The quiet builder will always outlast the noisy dreamer. Because while one is talking, the other is stacking bricks. While one is gathering likes, the other is gathering leverage. Silence keeps your goals clean and your vision tight. By mastering silence, you reclaim your power, and the world begins to notice not what you say but what you've built. As we continue, remember that silence is not only the absence of noise from the outside world, but also the mastery of the noise within, your own mind. When you keep your mind free from the clutter that comes with over-explaining or oversharing, you protect the seed while it is growing. And when it blooms, when what you've built starts to show, it doesn't need an introduction. People will feel its weight. They'll know that something serious has happened. They'll look back and realize you never even said a word. That's the power of silence. It's the discipline to act without noise, to aim without warning, to build without applause, and to win without needing to shout about it. Because true power never begs to be noticed. It simply arrives and changes everything. The greatest innovators, leaders, athletes, and creators all share something that isn't always obvious at first glance. They weren't built in the spotlight. They weren't shaped by applause, likes, or headlines. They were forged in silence in the quiet hours behind the scenes, while the world was watching someone else. They were building, practicing, refining, not waiting for permission, just preparing for the moment when their opportunity would come. And when it did, they didn't flinch, they didn't panic, they didn't need to catch up. They had already done the work long before anyone was paying attention. But here's the thing most people miss. The real noise doesn't always come from the outside. It's not just the opinions, distractions, or competition. It's that voice inside your own head, the one that never seems to stop. The inner critic that questions every step, the doubter that whispers, "What if you fail?" The overthinker that finds 1,000 reasons to wait, to delay, to hold back. That's the voice that derails more potential than any outside obstacle ever could. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And that's the danger of inner noise. It feels like truth. It dresses itself as logic, caution, or being smart. But really, it's fear in disguise. It's the part of you that's afraid of what will happen if you actually step into your full power. Because that version of you, the focused, disciplined, unstoppable version, doesn't need constant commentary. It doesn't need approval. It just moves. Silence isn't just about holding your tongue in public. It's about learning to stop debating with yourself in private. It's refusing to be pulled into every mental spiral that starts with, "What if?" Because when your mind is crowded with that kind of noise, your vision gets cloudy. You miss the signs, you miss the moments that were meant for you. The mind becomes so busy trying to keep up with imagined problems that it can't see the real solutions that are right there. Quiet, subtle waiting. When you start to silence that inner chaos, something powerful happens. You start hearing what was buried underneath. That intuitive voice, that gut instinct, the part of you that knows what needs to be done. And when you notice patterns, the little things others ignore, you catch opportunities that seem invisible to the noisy mind. You see connections between things that on the surface don't seem related, but deep down they are. Plato once said, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself." And that's exactly what silence helps you do. By listening to silence, you don't just master the world around you, you master yourself. Silence helps you uncover your true power. Building on the power of silence, let's explore how it transforms the way you interact with the world and how it paves the way for true self-awareness. Silence clears the path to self-awareness. It strips away the distractions, allowing you to hear yourself. Not the version shaped by anxiety or external pressure, but the one that exists beneath all of that noise. This is the version that is calm, focused, and clear. In that stillness, you begin to realize that discipline isn't just about external actions. It's also about internal alignment. It's about knowing when to challenge a thought and when to let it pass. It's about knowing when your mind is helping you and when it's holding you hostage. The strength to sit in silence, to resist. The urge to reach for a screen, a distraction, or a quick fix. This is real mental toughness, because it's in that silence where growth begins. It's where clarity happens. It's where strategy gets refined. Socrates once said, "An unexamined life is not worth living." But how can you examine anything if you're constantly talking over yourself? You need space. You need stillness. A break from the noise so you can actually see. And here's the truth, the deeper your silence, the stronger your insight becomes. Clarity isn't loud, wisdom doesn't shout, and the most important realizations in life rarely come wrapped in flashing lights. They arrive like whispers, and if your mind is too loud, you'll miss them. Here's a question for you. When was the last time you truly sat with yourself in silence? No music, no scrolling, no distractions. Just you, your thoughts, and the uncomfortable clarity that shows up when you stop running. It's not easy. Most people can't sit still because when the noise dies down, their insecurities surface. But that discomfort, that's your edge. If you can face it without flinching, you've just built a kind of strength that no external noise can touch. It's not about becoming cold or detached. It's about developing a kind of composure that doesn't crumble under pressure. Being unmoved doesn't mean you don't feel. It means your feelings don't own you. That pause between stimulus and response, that's where your power lives. Reacting is impulsive, responding is intentional, and that's the space where real influence begins, not from force, but from calm control. Leadership, in its truest form, isn't about volume. It's not about having the last word or speaking the most often. It's about presence. It's about the energy you bring into a room before you even say a word. The silent leader doesn't demand attention. They command it, but not through noise. It's through clarity, stability, and stillness. People feel it. They lean in, not because you raised your voice, but because when you do speak, it's clear that you've thought before talking. That kind of influence can't be faked. It's built in silence, in restraint, in watching, in reading the room, in understanding the temperature before jumping into the fire. Aristotle once said, "He who cannot be a good follower cannot be a good leader. And to follow well, you must first listen well." The quiet leader listens not just to reply, but to understand, trying to be heard. And that's the essence of using silence as a strategy, not just as a personal discipline, but as a powerful tool in the real world. Think about it. Walking into a negotiation, you don't need to rush to speak. You don't need to fill every pause with words. Instead, let the silence work for you. It's in that silence that you'll hear the truth, see the real intentions. They notice what others miss, filling in the gaps that no one else sees because they were too busy, and uncover the opportunities that others might miss. Building on the power of silence and how it can help you turn pressure and chaos into an advantage in any situation, let's explore further how you can use silence itself to flip the game. The room is filled with tension, agendas, egos, everyone eager to prove something, but you wait, you listen, you let the silence work for you. People begin to feel it, revealing more than they intended. Then, when the time is right, you speak. Not too much, just enough, but every word lands with impact. That's precision over volume. That's how you flip the game without raising your voice. This doesn't just apply in business or meetings. It applies to your personal goals, your projects, your growth. How much time is wasted chasing everything that looks like progress but adds nothing to your path? Scrolling, comparing, overcommitting. It's movement, sure, but not momentum. Not all effort is effective. Not all action is aligned. Plato once said, "The excessive increase of anything often causes a reaction in the opposite direction." And he was right. Too much scattered energy eventually creates burnout, confusion, and regret. That's why silence matters. It forces you to choose, to prioritize, to subtract, instead of trying to be everywhere and do everything. The silent strategist moves with intention. They say no more often, they go deep instead of wide. And that depth, that focused, quiet depth, that's what produces results that can't be ignored, even if no one sees the work being done. So much of winning in life isn't about speed, it's about direction. And you only find direction when you stop long enough to ask yourself, what actually matters right now? Not what's trending, not what everyone else is chasing, just what's true for you. What moves your mission forward? what aligns with who you are becoming. Silence clears the fog. It reminds you that you don't have to respond to every stimulus, jump at every opportunity, or explain yourself every time someone doesn't understand you. Just keep building quietly, relentlessly, with your eyes open and your energy intact. Silence teaches you something that noise never will, the value of subtraction. See, it's a world that constantly pushes for more. Silence pulls you back toward less but better. It sharpens your attention, showing you where you're leaking energy, because every time you say yes to something meaningless, something shallow, or out of alignment, you're by default saying no to something that really matters. Something real, something that could change your life. If only you had saved your time, focus, and energy for it. And that's why focus is so rare, not because people don't want it, but because they're too distracted to realize what they're giving up. In a culture overloaded with options, the person who can strip things down to what truly counts has the edge. That edge doesn't come from knowing everything. It comes from knowing what to ignore. But subtraction doesn't only matter when you're feeling strong. It matters even more when doubt creeps in, when you're in that foggy place, unsure of your next step, when clarity feels just out of reach. Those are the moments that reveal who's trained themselves to sit still and who scrambles for a quick fix. Because silence in those moments isn't a void, it's a mirror. It reflects back the version of you that's been buried under distraction, stripping away the filters. Building on the idea of silence as a tool to find clarity, we now dive deeper into how true strength is cultivated through this quiet awareness. No applause, no opinions, just you confronting the truth of who you are and who you're not. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." But silence doesn't let you run. It holds you in place, forcing you to come clean with yourself. And that's not weakness, it's the starting point of real strength. Because clarity doesn't come from more input, it comes from slowing down, from cutting the noise, from finally hearing your own voice without distortion. Here's something most people miss. Even in movement, silence plays a crucial role. Not everything loud is productive. Not every action needs to be broadcasted. You can be in motion and still remain rooted in quiet. In fact, the most effective action often grows out of stillness. That's where strategy lives. That's where timing sharpens. That's where your moves become deliberate instead of reactive. Plato said, "The measure of a man is what he does with power." And one of the greatest forms of power is the ability to pause, to act with precision, not just to move, but to know why you're moving and toward what. You don't build a life that matters by sprinting after everything that glitters. You build it by knowing what to chase and having the discipline to stay. Locked in when the world tries to pull you in 10 different directions. That's the beauty of silence. Here it slows the world down just enough for you to get honest with yourself. And in that honesty, you find alignment. And in that alignment, your actions finally start to mean something. They're not just habits or reactions. They become decisions you stand behind. Movements that reflect who you've chosen to be, not who you've been pressured into becoming. Because greatness doesn't come from intensity alone. It's not about how loud, fast, or aggressive you are. It comes from clarity, from knowing where you're going and why. And clarity only shows up when you stop trying to outrun the noise and start listening beneath it. So even when you're taking action, even when you're building, pushing, creating, carry silence with you. Not as absence, but as awareness, as depth. It's that steady internal compass that reminds you don't need to be loud to be powerful. You don't need to be seen to make progress. You just need to be clear. Clear on what matters. clear on who you are, and clear on where you're going. Some people move just to say they're moving. They rush into action not because it's time, but because stillness feels uncomfortable. They confuse motion with progress, noise with meaning. But there's a different kind of power, the one that comes from strategic patience. Waiting, not out of fear but out of wisdom. Sitting still not because you're uncertain, but because you know the moment hasn't come yet. And when it finally does, you don't flinch. You don't stutter, you strike. That's a different level of discipline. To know how to act is one thing, but to know when and to wait until that moment without folding under pressure, that's real strength. Because when you act from a place of stillness, your movement is clean. There's no hesitation, no need to explain it to anyone. You're not looking for approval, not asking for permission. You're just ready. And when it's time to continuing from the idea of silence and its profound impact, let's explore the powerful steps in life's journey, where there's no need to constantly prove or display oneself. You go all in. No hedging, no second guessing. No extra commentary to soften the blow or gather applause. You simply act with full force, full clarity, and full conviction. This kind of action, rooted in silence and refined through discipline, doesn't just make a dent, it leaves a mark. It lands and, more importantly, it lasts. This is the kind of impact most people miss because they're too busy chasing attention. They want to be seen, heard, celebrated. But here's the truth. Fame is loud and temporary. It requires constant noise to stay alive. It feeds off attention, and when the spotlight moves, so does its relevance. But legacy? That's different. Legacy doesn't beg to be seen. It builds while the world is distracted. It grows in the background during the early mornings and late nights when no one's watching. Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." And that awakening, the one that drives real, meaningful work, rarely happens under bright lights. It happens in silence. When you're alone with your thoughts, when you're building without praise, when you keep showing up day after day, even when there's no recognition, that's where legacy starts. Aristotle believed that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Legacy is built from those habits, from that consistency, from the moments that don't make headlines, but form the foundation of something unshakable. Something you can be proud of, not because it got noticed, but because it meant something. And when you live like that, focused, patient, grounded, you stop worrying about being remembered. You start focusing on being real, being useful, being true. That's the kind of work that survives trends, outlives hype, and speaks long after you're gone. Because it was never about being known, it was about making something worth knowing. The most powerful people aren't remembered for how loudly they spoke. They're remembered for the impact of what they built in silence. Their influence wasn't made through noise, it was carved into the world through consistent, disciplined work that didn't ask for attention but earned respect. They didn't perform for the crowd, they prepared for the moment. And when the moment came, they didn't need to announce themselves. The world noticed anyway. So maybe it's time to flip the script. What would your life look like if you stopped explaining and started executing? If you didn't need to share every plan, every goal, every move because you were too busy making them happen? What if you spent less time reacting and more time watching? Not watching out of fear or hesitation, but with the steady eye of someone gathering data, patterns, insight. Because sometimes, the best move isn't the loud one, it's the informed one. The move that's made at the right time with the right knowledge and the right intention behind it. Plato once said, "Wise men speak because they have something to say. Fools because they have to say something. And there's something freeing about realizing you don't have to say much, not because you don't have something to say, but because your focus is somewhere more valuable. Continuing from the idea of building something significant through silence and steady action, let's dive into the importance of quiet preparation and the long game. When you focus on the work, on the vision, on building something that doesn't need constant explanation to matter, you free yourself from the burden of proving. This space you create, free of explanations, becomes a place for quiet, powerful preparation. You begin to play the long game, and that long game changes everything. It's not driven by emotion or impulse, nor does it fall victim to the outside noise. Instead, it's built from clarity. And that clarity, the kind that cuts through confusion, comes from silence. Not the kind that hides, but the kind that sharpens. Let your work do the talking. Let your decisions speak for you. Let your consistency become your legacy. You don't need a megaphone when your results carry weight. In fact, the louder you try to be, the less space you leave for others to feel your presence. When you move with intention, people sense it without needing an explanation. Carl Jung believed, "A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them." And it's often in silence where that inner fire is faced, not in the chaos of performance, but in the quiet of preparation. That's where character gets refined, where depth is built. Once you've walked through that process, once you've learned to be still in the storm, you become the person who doesn't flinch when the pressure's on. In a world full of noise, you become the signal. The one who speaks less but says more. The one who doesn't posture but still commands the room. The one who doesn't need the last word because their actions have already closed the conversation. And always remember, the deepest waters make the least noise. The strongest people don't broadcast their strength. The loudest voice in the room might catch attention, but it rarely leads. It's the quiet one, the still one, the one who waits, listens, and executes, that ends up shaping the future. Because silence, when it's disciplined, intentional, and focused, isn't just a personality trait, it's a strategy. A strategy that wins battles without ever needing to raise a voice. One that prepares in the shadows and rises when it matters most. One that builds things that last long after the noise fades. That's the kind of power worth chasing. Not the kind that needs to be seen to be real, but the kind that works quietly and transforms everything it touches. In the end, it's not about how loud your voice is, it's about how deep your impact runs. Let your silence shape you, let your actions speak for you, and when the time comes, let your results be undeniable. If this message stirred something in you, there's more waiting. Watch one of the videos on your screen now. It just might be exactly what you need next. Thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal. Your presence here means more than you know. Until next time, stay grounded, stay focused, and keep walking your quiet path. We'll be here when you return.